Well, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Eric's going to join us on North Carolina's Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program risk management categories. So, Eric, let's do a sound check with you and see if you got the control of the mouse there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Got you, Eric? Yep.
All right, very good. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to NASCA and share some of the ideas where we feel like we've been able to get some efficiencies, some program efficiencies, and we're hoping that maybe these ideas might lead to future collaboration amongst the agencies and move forward. So what I'm going to talk about is CREP. We have conservation easements. We have about 1,200 conservation easements in the state. They're 30-year or permanent easements. And if you're looking at monitoring 1,200 easements, that's a huge undertaking. I have 3 staff that report to me that go out and monitor the easements, but that's just about 25% of their time. The bulk of the time, about 50 to 60% of their time, should be spent reaching out to landowners and producers and trying to sell the program. Well, when COVID came, we had to regroup and we had to do something that was solitary. So the guys are out there monitoring our conservation easements for compliance. And, you know, these regular inspections help us, you know, find problems early on. So we developed the risk categories probably maybe 2015 or so. And it's been influenced by many factors: size, you know, the shape, the adjacent land use, accessibility, history of compliance has been an issue. So, you know, everybody has limited resources, whether that be time or money. So our risk categories are helping us maximize our resources. We've developed 4 categories: very high, high, medium, and low. And the very high risk categories are where the easement is adjacent to golf courses or municipal parks. Believe it or not, municipal parks have seasonal staff and they don't understand where the boundary of the park is. So you end up getting a lot of encroachment when you've got a municipal park as a neighbor. When you've got more than 50% of the easement abutting residences. Residences, again, they like to dump on somebody else's property. They're not fans of dumping on their own property. So very high risk categories where 50% of the conservation easement is you know, having high risk adjacent to it. So cows, livestock, where the livestock are always rubbing up against the fence and pushing their limits. That's going to be monitored semi-annually using only on-the-ground methodology. We've tried to use drones. Drones are, you know, a macro scale type of monitoring, but it just doesn't get down to the nitty gritties. Getting down to the high frequency, it's where you've got 20 to 50% of the boundary with high impact issues. The other thing that can happen is when property changes ownership. Well, we want to establish a working relationship with the landowner. And so we will move that individual into the high risk category because these are properties that are monitored annually. Medium risk categories are properties not included in the other risk categories. And this is done every other year. We may do a drone or aerial survey in those other years where we don't have boots on the ground. And then our ultimate goal is to get into a low frequency property. And that's where we've got less than 50% of the conservation easement boundary, or excuse me, more than 50% of the boundary surrounded by local, state, or federal property that's managed and a natural condition for conservation. A lot of the times with low frequency, that's almost like a drive-by. We monitor these properties every third year, and the other 2 years, again, we can just do a drive-by. Some of the things that might affect or change the risk is changes in adjacent land use. So, you know, this individual likes to mow, and you see our trees in the background. So now we might have an issue where the adjacent landowner is potentially going to impact us. So we might bump up the inspection risk. And as I had previously indicated, new ownership. So if the property changes ownership, then we're going to put them into the high risk category, and it's going to be monitored for 3 years. What we like to do is monitor easements in the event category for 3 times. So, and then we try and bump it back on down to the next lower level. The very high risk categories, the land use doesn't change, so they're not likely to change out of the very high risk categories. The high risk and the medium risk eventually, hopefully, will be down in the lower level. And anytime where we encounter a violation, that's going to change the risk category and probably put it back on up to the high risk or the very high risk category. And as I tend to do, I try and make sure that we get back on schedule. So, Ray, I appreciate the opportunity to share some ideas.